Hey! I've got pieces of leather sitting on my floor. I wonder why. Doing tons of leather work. There is a strain of proximity to truth and wisdom. And outside of that circle, it's like it doesn't exist. Essentially, the simplest analogy I could think of is you can go anywhere in the world, places where you don't find gold, right? Like even Kentucky. I could go painting for gold in the creek on my farm. I could find it. It wouldn't take very long to do. But there's no gold there really. In other words, I'd have to put in $1,000 of labor to get $5 of gold. So, it's not a place that you would go for gold. So when it comes to wisdom, or things that are very proximal to pointing the correct, expedient methodology and understanding to, I have a tomato on my front of my, sorry, but I was just got done eating some tomatoes, pointing the expedient route to the truth. There are things that are a lot better than others. There's a specific strain that runs Philosophia Perennis, this perennial philosophy of true metaphysics. And some of them kind of speak around the edges. Sorry about that. I should never eat tomatoes before doing a live stream. Little baby tomatoes are so juicy, right? Sorry about that. Like Frithjof Schuon, and who's that horrible French metaphysician? René Guénon. I have basic letters, but he's just horrible. And what little he said that was even slightly intelligent, he stole or took from Dr. Ananda Kichu's Kumaraswamy. But there is a thread that all of these people circle around. Every famous Indian metaphysician and experts of translating Sanskrit, whether it be Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, Ananda Kichu's Kumaraswamy, and there are others, they all gravitated towards Neoplatonism and Neoplatonic thought. It doesn't have to be specifically Neoplatonism. But there are these people that the seed of understanding, and the seed of understanding is actually a primer of understanding. It's like having a key or a legend. You can look at this really complex map. God, never eat tomatoes before coming on a live stream. I'm so sorry, but this isn't a live stream. Hello. So I'm going to edit this out later. A key or a legend in a map, unless you have that, you can't understand what's going on. And people that were inspired, like the one work, just one example, is that of this guy. He was a translator of Pseudo-Dionysius. This is John Scotus Eriugena, which basically means Irish twice. Eriugena the Scot. Eriugena actually means from Ireland too. So we know his name was John, so there's not a whole lot we know about him, other than his students stabbed him to death with their pens, which is probably a true story, by the way. He lived from 800 CE to 877, John Scotus Eriugena, and he wrote his primary work. It was the Pitaphesian. I recommended that over countless videos to people. And an enormous amount of people, literally an enormous amount of people, replied back, I'm reading this stuff. My understanding of how things work is so much better. I understand how to think more clearly, and I look through things of a type of metaphysical eye that I never had before, and it makes things much more clear. I have the ability to decipher nonsense from what's logical. And the notion that if you go to the metaphysics section of a bookstore, it's all a bunch of New Age woo-woo. Well, like about 90% of it is. It's like, this is the metaphysics section of the bookstore. It's about chakras and crystals, and I have no interest in any of that trash. I mean, just none. If you like it, fine, don't care. That's not metaphysics at all. I mean, it's absolutely not. True metaphysics is hyperlogical. The most logical people that are the foundations of Western society and the scientific method, true science, by the way, not the stuff that passes as science today, were Plato and Aristotle. And they were hardcore metaphysicians, Plato much more so than Aristotle, but Aristotle himself is a metaphysician. Aristotle wrote endlessly on metaphysical principles, and they have within their head, and they use retroduction, which of course I'm writing a little booklet on retroduction. Retroduction is not only methodology, it's also too a method of synthesis for disobjectification. That's the basis of all true metaphysics. But there's this thread that runs through it. The people that have the seed of wisdom planted in their head, like John Scotus Eriugena. This is another work that he did. It was a translation of Pseudo-Dionysius' mystical theology. It's called, and I appreciate the wonderful person, Mr. Cox, who sent this book to me. I had been wanting this book for years. I have every book imaginable, and of course I've been scanning in thousands, literally thousands and thousands of books, literally thousands over the decades. It's a 13th century textbook of mystical theology at the University of Paris. It's a translation of Pseudo-Dionysius, the Eriugena. I didn't call him Pseudo-Dionysius for a reason. Anyway, this Neoplatonic methodology of retroductive logic and thinking, and it's inspired the Sufi movement. Neoplatonic Sufism is a broad and expansive. Nobody ever talks about that. When you're reading this stuff, and I have many, many examples of it, Ibn Sabram, I can't remember his last name. That language is absolutely not my forte at all. Anyway, it's specifically Neoplatonic. And of course nothing is known except through the modality of the knower. People express things as they understand it, but it's still within the chain of understanding of this same principle leading to the center, that retroductive methodology. It is a type of thinking. It's not thinking, actually, not meant as cogitation. It's a type of noetic, transcendental understanding. I don't mean transcendental in a New Age movement, touchy, crystals and chakras and the stuff that calls itself metaphysics today, which is not metaphysics at all, that leads oneself to understanding. I mean, there's a reason, like I said, the greatest Indian metaphysicians and authors like Radhakrishnan and Kumaraswamy, when they actually become more ripe in their understanding, they always gravitate towards Neoplatonic authors like Plotinus, Porphyry, Numenius, Iamblichus, Damasius, Simplicius. There's a list of them. The core ones are essentially 10 in number. And by doing so, you have this brilliant legend of the nature and simplicity of things. It's a primer, kind of like the Rosetta Stone, where things are, aha, now I understand. I understand how this ties into this, and this ties into this, and this ties into this. They all have that in common, such that it allows them to fall down this vortex of wisdom and simple understanding of natura naturans, or Mother Nature. They have all of that in common. There's a reason why on one of the pillar edicts of King Ashoka of ancient India, i.e. Roughly somewhere around 450 BCE, 2,600 plus years ago, that the principles of original, and I stress the word original Buddhism, were being observed by King Ptolemy II of ancient Egypt. There's many things that are currency. Like America exports movies and entertainment, not anymore though, exports movies and entertainment to the world. Wisdom and methodologies of comprehending nature was extremely valuable currency. People always talk about spices and, furs and silks and stuff. I grew up, and so did you, my entire life hearing about, the trade of spices and furs and silks and stuff, and the Silk Road. But ideas, even though it didn't feed you and put money on the table, was considered as valuable in many cases, of course, by the wise, more valuable than that. And they were traded heavily. People thirsted, for wisdom in a far-off lands. Like, hey, I want translated. That is extremely valuable. I have always valued information. I've been collecting information for decades. I literally have been. Oh man, I can prove that too. And the ancient people, especially unless they're profane people, the ancient people that had any brain at all did the same. And all of these ideas have one core nexus in retroduction and monistic simplicity. Advaita Vedanta, the Upanishads, original Buddhism, Platonism, Neoplatonism, Pythagoreanism, they all revolve, the Upanishadic thought, yes, the principal Upanishads, they all revolve around this Sophia Perennis, this perennial philosophy. True philosophy, not Western existentialists like Kant, Hume, who's that horrible German Nietzsche? He's not a philosopher. He's a Western existentialist navel gazer looking at the the fuzz in their belly button hole. Those are not real philosophers. True philosophy, Philosophia, the love of wisdom, they all have that same thing in common. And John Scotus Eriugena, I don't know to what degree, but everyone agrees, was divinely inspired by the writings of Pseudo-Dionysius. And this is a Latin. I love the fact that the Latin's on one side and the English is on the other. Love it. Appreciate this book, by the way, Mr. Cox. Divinely inspired to write the Pitaphesian. And I recommended everybody, teenager on up, when you could get away with, a formal education, which is indoctrination and nonsense, by reading stuff like that. It will elevate you in ways that you never thought possible. It will change you, and in every way for the good. Reading the Pitaphesian. Oh my, people email me, oh, I can't believe it. I'm reading the Pitaphesian. This stuff is great. I have a hard time understanding some of it, but it really changes my mind, and it's for the better. They don't say, well, it changed my mind for the worst. No one said that. No one would say that. It's not possible. When things are spoken of to another from speaking from the center, of divine understanding, and I do mean divine understanding, it draws people in like a vortex, and it is always for the better. All of these people have the same thing in common. Like I said, nothing is known except in the modality of the knower. And there's this common thread, and that's what sutra means, by the way. It's the thread of which the tapestry of wisdom is woven, by the way. Sutra, or sutta in Pali, this means thread. It's the thread of wisdom. With the thread of wisdom, you weave and tell the story, a tapestry of wisdom, of ultimate reality. And all these authors have that in common, of the perennial philosophy. Ananda Kitish Kumaraswamy was a perennial philosopher. There are more than a few, but not a lot. And that's the missing secret and legend. And legend, I mean that which explains what's going on. Because everybody can see what's going on in the world, and I don't mean like right now. It's like everybody could see nature. If you got eyes and a memory, you see, humans interacting, you see everything in nature, but nobody really has a legend. It's that little thing in the bottom of a map that tells you what this stuff means. It's like, oh, that little squiggly line means a river. This means that, and like, this is the X number of distance. This is the scale of it all. It's like, oh, now I understand the map. And these perennial philosophies are their writings are a legend that is a primer to the understanding of natura naturans, or Mother Nature. That's all they are. They're more than that, really, but I mean, that's fundamentally what they are. So that's what these things have in common, but 99.999% of the world never stumbles upon these key legends, I've said this many times, I could always tell what somebody understands or what they don't understand, but it's like, what's the wisest or most intelligent book? Not your favorite book. What's the most intelligent or wise book you've ever read? I can always tell what somebody knows or doesn't understand about nature by the garbage that this is my favorite guy. It'd be like some Zen Buddhist windbag, some guy in fancy robes, and he has on the back cover of his book, he's like this. Some superficially peaceful dude talking about emptiness and other nihilistic nonsense, like, oh, you don't know anything, Sorry to hear that. You don't know anything at all. So, if you really want to know something, there are, and I mentioned these countless times in various videos, a handful of authors, Plotinus, Proclus, Iamblichus, Syrianus, Principal Upanishads, Adi Sankara, who wrote Upadisa Sahasra and the Vivachudamuni, the foundational teachings of Advaita Vedanta, Sarvapati Radhakrishnan, Swami Nikhilananda, specifically Dr. A.K. Kumaraswamy, who knew 27 languages and wrote countless numbers of books, literally, and hundreds of articles. That's the nexus and vortex of true understanding. That's the primer and the legend for understanding the truth about nature, about cosmic mechanics, both physics and metaphysics. Physics and metaphysics are not two different things. They're just different sides of the same coinage of the silver. It's all about the silver, which is the true metaphysical foundation of everything. They don't care about the calling it physics or metaphysics. It's all the exact same silver. There's no such thing as a head and a tail or physics and metaphysics. There's a holos. There's a single one that encompasses both physics and metaphysics. They're not two different things. Over here we got physics and science, and over here we got metaphysics. It's like, you know, they're two different things. They're not two different things. Stupid people say that. A scientist will say that. That's not truth. That's completely the opposite of the truth. So just think about that. I've recommended these books. If you'd like me to go specifically into some of the books, I already have several times, you know, the best books of recommendation. I can yet again and expand and broaden some of those books in mentioning them, but you tell me if that's necessary. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but that's the common thread or sutra that runs through these perennial philosophers, is that they have an insight and they have a true primer and a true legend into the nature of reality. And by digesting and consuming those and thinking for yourselves, like don't read it and just accept it, you know, okay, I read it. No, you have to make it yours. True understanding and transcendence has nothing to do with reading and memorization. I mean, that's just religion and dogma. It's like, I'm not talking about dogma and I'm not talking about religion. It's like, I read it. I even memorized it. It's like, well, yeah, but you don't understand it. You don't know what it says. You have to make it yours. I'm not ever talking about just reading stuff. I hate it when people do that. They say, you're just talking about reading stuff. It's dogma. No, just reading and memorization and recitation is dogma. True understanding and asking questions of oneself and the nature of reality is not dogma. That's called proximity to wisdom, which is actually self-proximity. Because in the premise of true metaphysics, the self and wisdom are not two different things. They're exactly the same thing. Wisdom brings oneself closer to one's true self, i.e., as opposed to the existential self, which is the not self, or namisvata, not the soul. Wisdom and the soul are not two different things. They're the exact same thing. It's like saying ice and water are two different things. Like, no, they're not. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope I didn't engage in too much logomachy. There's a word everybody needs to learn. Logomachy. It's just a fancy way of saying flapping your lips unnecessarily. Thanks. Mental note, never eat cherry tomatoes before going onto a video. Okay. Oh, goodness.